Hey, welcome to the Bald Truth Leadership Podcast, a place where you get straightforward, no nonsense ideas on leadership and growth, both personally and professionally. The Bald Truth is brought to you by the Peak Performance Group. I am your host, Coach Rick Colster, certified executive coach and the chief coaching officer for the Peak Performance Group, where we help people and organizations align and maximize their potential. Today, folks, our guest is one that is well-known. He's a well-known thought leader, an advocate for the American people. And I am so excited to have this man on today. His career includes 22 years as a military decorated Army officer, serving in both Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and the war against terror. And I am just excited to get to have him on the show. He's a former member of the House of Representatives, the board of the NRA. He's currently running for chairman of the Republican Party of Texas. So talk about somebody who's done a lot in his life. This guy, he's got it going on. There's much more, but I'll let him share when we get on. I'd like to welcome to the Bald Truth, old school patriot, proud Tennessee volunteer, and a pretty good motorcycle rider, even if he's riding a Victory rather than a Harley. Welcome to the Bald Truth, Lieutenant Colonel West.
Good to be with you, Coach Rick. Thanks so much for having me on, and I pray that you're staying safe and healthy in these very interesting times.
They are interesting times, are they not? We are doing the best. We are sheltered in place and have been. Heck, I've been sheltered in place since the 12th of March. I have to look up and check my calendar because it seems like
Groundhog Day.
It's 1999 all over again. I don't know what's happening. We were talking this morning, and we've repurposed a couple of rooms, obviously. My wife is now working from home, and now her office it doubles as the office, the gun safe, and the gym.
Well, that's cool.
So she'll be on a Zoom call, and I'll be back there lifting weights, doing my thing. Well, let's say, where do we get started here? Let's talk. I want to learn about you a little bit and how you've been leading the charge for the conservative movement, for the Bill of Rights, all that's going on in your world. And I just love hearing, I love watching what you're doing. I read your blog posts, and you're such an advocate for the American people. What drives that passion?
Well, that passion comes from a couple of great parents that believed in the American way and the American dream. A father and a mother who served this country. My dad was a corporal in the United States Army during World War II. My mother gave about 25, maybe 27 years of civilian service to the 6th Marine Corps District Headquarters back in Atlanta, Georgia. And so, yeah, hoorah. And so they always taught me about service, sacrifice, and commitment to something that is greater than yourself. And at the age of 15, my dad sat me down on the steps of our house in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in the old 4th Ward neighborhood, which is the same neighborhood that produced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Sure,
My elementary school is right across the street from Ebenezer Baptist Church. But my dad challenged me to be the first officer in our family because he was a corporal. My older brother was a lance corporal in the United States Marine, Vietnam combat veteran. And so that got me started through high school junior ROTC. Then I went to the University of Tennessee, and on 31 July 1982, I was commissioned as an officer in the field artillery and served 22 years, as you just mentioned.
God bless. There's interesting parallels in our lives. My dad, my uncles, my dad served in both the Navy and the Air Force during the Korean War. One of my uncles was a POW in World War II. My cousin served in Vietnam as a Vietnam Marine. He's a little bit older than I am. And my two brothers that went to the Naval Academy. I know, go Navy, beat Army. But I also now have a nephew who is currently serving as a Green Beret. Got his Green Beret in December, and he's currently at Fort Bragg learning Chinese. He's a 15 West Point grad. So we have got and my brother was the first officer to come out of our family. So there's some serious parallels there. So very cool. I love that.
There are serious parallels, and I think that's what sustains America, is that legacy of the guardians of this great republic. That, this past Sunday was the 245th anniversary of Lexington Green and Concord Bridge. And you think about over these 245 years, how many men and women have answered that call of service, called to duty for this great country. And I think that if we ever get to the point where we don't raise that next generation of servants to this great nation, of men and women who are willing to stand on freedom's ramparts, then we lose the essence of who we are as a nation.
One of the things that, having seen you speak and met you a few times, one of the things that always just resonated with me was your knowledge of history. I mean, he's blowing me away. Lexington, that's so far away from anything that I like. I think I'm a history buff. I love reading books about wartime and military and what our history's done. But you dig in. You know this, and tell me about how that love has got to be a passion for you.
Yeah,
Where did
it
you come up
is.
with that passion?
Well, it is, and again, it comes from my dad because he shared stories. I mean, his stories, growing up down south as a young black man in South Georgia, and also the stories of him serving over there in World War II, which drove me. And sitting down, looking at all those historical movies with dad, and so it became a very integral part of who I am. And I think that when you remember the quote attributed to George Santayana about circa 1928, he said, "Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." And, there's so many things from the past that really do equate to, things that are occurring right here in the future right now. If you think about how just Tuesday of this week, the 21st of April, that was San Jacinto Day. That's a pretty important day here in the state of Texas,
Yes, it is.
because that's when Texas won its independence. 18 minutes. That's all it took to whip Santa Anna. But when you think about it, the tragedies that happened before that victory at San Jacinto. You had the massacre at the Alamo. You had the massacre at Goliad. But it just steeled the resolve of those Texians and those volunteers from other states. And that reminds me of another great stand where free men stood in the gap against tyranny. And that was back when Xerxes and the Persians invaded Greece, 490 BC, in the Battle of Thermopylae, where those 300 Spartans stood in the gap and they bought time for the rest of Greece to come together. And of course, when you had that great naval battle at Salamis the following year, that was where the Persian navy was defeated, and Xerxes had to flee and go back to Persia. So there are all kind of great parallels. Like I said, Lexington Green, Concord Bridge on April the 19th, San Jacinto on April the 21st. That's why I hope that right now that parents are taking the time to sit down with their kids, and they're having to school them from home. Teach them a little bit about history. Share some of these stories with them. Flip on the History Channel. I think that's a great place where we can learn the real character of who we are as American people, so that we can get through this crisis.
You know what? I've got goosebumps running up and down my arms and legs right now. When you're talking about Thermopylae, you're talking about the Persians, you're talking about the history, the battles. I mean, literally, I got little goosebumps. And it's just knowing that, and as we talk about the fact of what history's done, what we've experienced for its history. And as you said, those that don't know history are doomed to repeat it.
Mhm.
And so think, what are some of the parallels that we're going on? Look at what's happening today. We're in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis,
Mhm.
pandemic, if you will. How do you see the parallels? I mean, this is curious because you're obviously a historical expert. What are some of the parallels that we can take from this? And what do we need? What is your opinion we need to do?
Well, I think the most important thing that we have to learn, and from that perspective of leadership, is that leaders never operate in what can't be done. Leaders always operate in understanding what can be accomplished, what can be achieved.
I
And
love
so,
that.
and so when we look at what has happened here, you had a coronavirus crisis, which, if you comparatively look at some of the common influenza crises we've seen recently, it pales in comparison right now. But when we succumb to fear, paranoia, panic, and hysteria, then we allow people to subsume more of our constitutional rights. It was Sir Winston Churchill who stood there in the face of the tyranny of the Nazi British invasion, and he said, "Fear is a reaction, courage is a decision." So I think that when we look back through history, and even our own history, we can see all of these instances where, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, the only thing that we have to fear is fear itself. So why are we sheltering in place and cowering away? When you look at the ramifications, I mean, we have decimated our economy, Rick. The fact that here in Texas, for the first time in American history, we had oil futures in the market trading in a negative range.
I
That's
know they want to pay. I'm ready to dig a hole in my backyard and fill it full of oil right now.
Yes, that's unconscionable to me. And the fact that you have people that will sit back and say, well, we don't know why this will happen. Well, think about it. If you're telling people to stay at home, they can't get out, they can't work, airplanes are parked on runways, school buses are parked in parking lots, you're driving down the demand for that resource. And so, therefore, if you drive down demand, look at what is happening. So, there are all of these things that we can learn through history, being national security, economic security, energy security. And I think it's imperative that we as a people start demanding more of the folks that we elect to these positions of quote unquote leadership, instead of what I'm seeing is really abysmal examples of quote unquote leadership in the United States of America right now.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons you want to you're stepping into that leadership role and you're running for the Republican Party chair as the chair of the Republican Party here in Texas. I know you can make a difference in that. And it's interesting. You just resonated with when we were talking about oil prices years ago. I don't know, you may or may not remember it. There was a trend. They said, don't buy oil on this day and we're going to put the Saudis out of business. And
Yeah.
remember that? They say, everybody don't buy it. It'll screw up all the oil companies because they make too much money. Well, we all laughed at that a little bit, but now it wasn't one day. It's been, 30, almost 60 days now.
Yes.
That we've cut back. It does make a difference. It's amazing how just that little bit has changed our economy so much. But and I don't know where it goes from here, to be honest with you. But I do know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And as you said, it's leadership. It's going to be leadership that takes us out of there. And that's what the Bald Truth is all about, is about leadership, helping leaders become better leaders. And so some of those things that, in your opinion, so your thoughts, and I value this because you've been leading men and women for most of your adult life. What do you think are some of the key things that leaders need to focus on? Say, if you can limit it to three key leadership points that absolutely positively a leader's got to nail.
Well, I'll have to up that to 5 because this is what I learned from
overachievers. I love them.
My time in the military. I call it the 5 C's of leadership.
Okay, 5 C's.
The first one is courage, and I just talked about that with Winston Churchill saying that fear is a reaction, courage is a decision. Sometimes it takes a lot of you to act in a way that some people may think is not the right direction, but a leader has to have that courage and find that within themselves. I would always ask people to go and study the leadership of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain at the Battle of Little Round Top, second day at Gettysburg. Not a professional military man, a professor of rhetoric put in charge there at the end of the line for the Army of the Potomac. And with all that was going on, he still found the courage to make the right decision and save the day for the Army of the Potomac. The second thing is competence. I think it is so important that leaders study and understand. Not saying that you can be the expert in everything, but you can be knowledgeable in most things that you are confronted with. And so, therefore, as we used to say in the military, no one's going to follow a dummy into a firefight. So you've got to have the competence to be able to lead in those stressful situations. The next thing is commitment. You have to have a commitment to a core set of principles and values, and you have to embody those. I mean, you should be the living example of the things that you say that you believe in and that you are seeking to inject into the people that are looking to you as a leader. But then also you have to have a conviction to those principles and values, because so often people will say, I'm committed to this, but then when the conditions get a little different, all of a sudden their conviction changes and they try to shift away. The important thing for leaders to know is that at the beginning of the day, when you look at yourself in the mirror, you can still look at yourself at the end of the day and recognize that you did not sacrifice any of your principles and values, that you were convicted and committed to those things, regardless of what happened in that day. And then the last thing I think is so important for leaders is character. And as I always talk to soldiers And my two daughters and everyone around me, character means doing what is right when no one's watching. That's the key aspect of leadership. So I would say the 5 points of leadership, the 5 C's: courage, competence, commitment, conviction, and character.
That's you nail it. And on one of our previous versions, or one of our previous episodes of The Bald Truth, we had Chad Hennings, and I know you know Chad as well, and we talked really heavy about character, and we both know he's a man of character.
Yes.
So that's exciting. I'm hearing a lot of repetition as I continue to talk to leaders. We're hearing some of these characters. The book, Roll Up Your Sleeves and Get to Work. That's my book that I wrote. We're going to talk about yours in a second, but it's about attitude, having the right mindset, commitment, and action. And I think those are what's critical for leaders as well. And I love that the commitment thing matches up. You and I match up. Like I said, there's some parallels in us. We could be mistaken for each other occasionally.
Yeah, I think I just got a little bit more hair.
Yes, you do.
No, but every single one of us, we need to have that common ideological core. And when I look at what is happening in America, that is really the difference right now, is the ideological core of this nation. Are we a nation that still believes in rugged individualism, will, determination, drive, resilience? Or are we a nation that believes that, let's just sit at home and wait for the government to send us another check? That's not who we are. And I think, Rick, that's why you see people taken to the streets, because they don't want to live like that. They want to be economically empowered. They want to be able to pursue their own happiness. They don't want to be economically enslaved. And they want to be victors and not victims. And so when you talk about leaders and leadership, they should understand, especially here in America, the nature of who we are. If you are an elected official, a leader in the state of Texas, you should understand Texas history and what makes Texas unique. This mystique, this aura about being here in Texas. And you should make sure that people that are moving into Texas, they understand that as well. Texas has 29 million, estimated 29 million population. We're getting close to 2 million people in Texas that are unemployed. But yet, when you look at the numbers for this coronavirus, we haven't even hit 600 people that have lost their lives, sadly, in Texas. So that's where leaders have to have the courage to sit back and say, hey, look, it is more important that we don't create a long-term economic or energy-related demise of this great state, because that's not the character. That's not who we are ideologically here in Texas. When you think about those men 184 years ago and what they did in 18 minutes at San Jacinto, these were guys who were starving. They were cold, they were wet, but they were driven by a belief. And the greatest power in this world is the power of individual drive for liberty.
And that was just on my mind, and you hit it right at the end there. Is I believe in Texas, number one, and both of us, we're Texan transplants. As I say, we're Texans by choice, not by chance. So we got here because we chose to be here. And it's an interesting parallel there in when I think of how we as a nation look to Texas.
Yes.
And people look to Texas for that lead. And, it's Texas proud. We love being Texans. And we're going to make something happen here. I truly believe that we're going to step up and we're going to see the best of the best really rise to the top. We're going to see some of the best come in. And the rest is going to flow out to the sea and just get away. Yeah. And I believe that's really good what's going to come out of this. We're seeing new ways of doing business.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right. We're leveraging technology and things of this nature. You look at the example of the mayor in Colleyville, right here in North Texas.
Yeah, I know. I saw that this morning.
Yeah, he said, hey, look, enough of this. And that's what I'm talking about with courage. A mayor that is stepping up and saying, I'm not going to continue to swim with the rest of the salmon. I'm going to, make sure that we do the right thing to take care of people. Instead of trying to do like you see down in Port Aransas, where now they're going to arrest people for going fishing, or down in Laredo, Texas, where the mayor and the police chief, they arrested 2 women. They were just doing nails in their own home. they had clients that came to their home to do nails. And so instead of these violations of our liberties, our freedoms, and that aura, that drive that you see here in Texas, you have a mayor that has stepped out and said, nah, enough of this. I mean, we that's not how we live in Texas.
Yeah, and I agree. That's really the way it is. So switch gears a little bit. And you mentioned growing up in the deep South
Yeah.
during some crazy time. I grew up in northern New Jersey and I remember the riots of Newark. And we're about the same age, so we kind of experienced the same thing. Tell me, how did that affect your desire to take leadership from that? I know your dad said go to the military. You're going to be an officer. But experiencing that and living that, it's really curious to me is because I remember my experiences of what it was. What were some of the experiences and takeaways you take that kind of still flavor your thought processes today?
Well, it's very simple. I was born February the 7th of 1961 in Hughes Spalding Hospital in Atlanta. In 1961, Hughes Spalding Hospital was a blacks only hospital. But think about this, the kid born in the old Fourth Ward in a blacks only hospital in 1961, 50 years later. And at the same time, down in South Florida, blacks could not go on Fort Lauderdale Beach. Blacks could not go over on Palm Beach Island, none of the beaches along the Southeast Florida coast. But 50 years later in 2011, I'm sworn in as the congressional representative that represents Fort Lauderdale Beach, Mar-a-Lago, Palm Beach Island, all of these things. See, that only happens here in America. And when you have a dad and a mother that sits down and looks at you and gets you to understand that your color is not a crutch because you live in the greatest nation that the world has ever known, then they tell you that the great equalizer is to go out and be competent, be educated. And that's why I said competence is the second most important thing about being a leader. But first and foremost, you have to have the courage. So you step out and say that no one's going to hold you back. And when people see that you have that type of drive and desires yourself, you draw others towards you. And so that's what I think that each and every person should do. And again, it comes back to the theme that I like to say, America is about creating victors, not victims. Although there's a certain ideology in America that wants people to be more victims. And the exact same neighborhood that I grew up in is a shell of itself today when you look at some of the policies that have happened in our urban population centers. And one of those critical things is the breakdown of the family. I grew up and I had, a mother and father in the home.
Sure.
Only 24% of Black kids today have a mother and the father in the home. And so that's where leadership starts. Leadership starts with having that balance of parents that are there to, give you those thoughts, perspectives, and insights, and set the conditions for you to be able to be successful. I always tell folks, my dad never gave me an allowance. My dad gave me a lawnmower. He gave me a water hose. He gave me a bucket. And I would spend every weekend, when the season was right, up and down our street and wherever, washing cars, mowing yards, what have you. That's teaching you responsibility, individual responsibility, to go out there and work hard and do it yourself for yourself. So I think when you talk about, developing yourself as a leader, it starts in the home. And if we have strong homes, if we have strong families, then we create the next generation of great leaders. Not saying that a single parent can't do it, but I think that when you have that balance of both parents there, that enhances that success.
Oh, I agree. I grew up with two parents, and knowing my parents, they loved each other, but I've watched my parents, get at every parent.
Oh, yeah.
I guess every couple has gotten at it every once in a while. But like you, my dad said, I was the oldest of four, born in May 10th, 1959. Yeah, Mother's Day. I was my Mother's Day present.
Pretty good present.
I don't know, I guess. And but he told me, he says, my mother told me at 14, you have to go get a job. I said, what do you mean? She says, 14, you have to get a job. We can't afford to feed and clothe you. So you got to pick one. You're going to buy food or you're going to buy clothes for yourself. Of course, I wanted those cool Levi jeans back then. And that was when Levi's just first came out. I had to get a pair of those. But literally, my parents signed working papers. They called them working papers back then. So I could get a job at a clothing store for $1.27 an hour, whatever the heck it was. Summertime, cut lawns. A couple of the lawns shoveled snow in the winter because there was plenty of snow in New Jersey.
Yeah, no kidding.
For the old lady, $2 for the old lady up the street. And I was actually talking to my wife the other day. We were talking about what we did as kids, how we grew up. And she says, I want to buy a bicycle because we're walking the park. I'm walking 4.5 miles a day. She's thinking, I might want to get a bicycle. I said, I did one of those. I remember my first bicycle.
Yeah.
And I bought an orange Schwinn 10-speed with the money I made by cutting lawns because that's what I wanted. My dad said, you want it? Here it is. Go get it. And that's, I think that what we're missing today is we give, your kid says, I want a bike. They go, oh, let's see, what's the best bike I can buy them? And it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars later instead of, a used bike you might have to pick up, or even used cars. We see it, and we live in a crazy affluent area in the North Texas area, and we see kids getting new BMWs and all that. I think that takes away from the growth that we are supposed to give our children.
No, you're absolutely right.
It harms them.
You're absolutely right. And I would take it a little step further. I would call that the culture of the participation trophy. When we came up with the belief that we could give kids something that, for doing nothing. My mother had a great quote. She said, self-esteem only comes from doing esteemable things. So you don't go out and expect someone's going to give you something for doing nothing. But yet we have a generation that were brought up that way. We have a generation that were always told they're perfect, they're good, they're great. If the teacher gave them a bad mark, we got mad at the teacher instead of getting mad at our son and daughter. So I think
that's going to stop now. Now that we have all the homeschooling, I'm pretty sure that the parents are going, wait a minute, you teachers are angels. What can I buy you? Can I get you pencils? Can I get you pens? What do you need? Markers? You need a bottle of wine? What do you need? You got it, whatever you want.
Well,
after having to homeschool the kids.
That's one of the great positive things that I would pray comes out of this. But we've got to stop believing that being so risk averse for our kids. When I was growing up, there were times, you're out there riding a bike, you have an accident on the bike, your blood coming down, and, mom and dad would say, you walking, you're okay. But,
you're not dead.
You're not dead. And so if we develop a generation that grows up and looks for a safe space or looks for, somewhere to hide when things get a little tough, that's not the resilient type of people that we want to have. Like what we saw 84 years ago at the Battle of San
Think of the children back 180 something years ago, what they were going through, because they were involved in these battles. They may not have been participating fully as the men did, but they were still experiencing that.
Sure.
Like you mentioned, you go out and play, and again, we were talking about that the other day. I remember I was out and they were building one of the spurs off of Route 80 into Newark, because I grew up 8 miles from Newark, and they Route 280, and they blasted it through the mountains. So where do you think all the kids played?
Yeah, up there
on the freeway. They were blasting. They had a train track that used to run all of the limestone and all the rock down into. That's how they grew Port Newark. They dumped all the rocks from the Watchung Mountains down there. They had a train track, and we used to put pennies on them. I think we would flip the train putting a penny on it. I have lots of flat pennies now. But I blew my knee out. I was screwed around out where I shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And I was playing with my buddy, and I was probably 7th, 8th grade, and blew my first knee surgery. And what did we do? Put your arm around your buddy. We limped home. Yeah. We limped home, and mom and dad went, what happened? Well, I hurt my knee. Well, we'll have to take a look. And it was emergency room after that. And I spent a couple days in the hospital and 6 months in a cast. But our parents let us do that. They let us get hurt. They let us, and my dad looked at me and says, you won't be doing that stupid stuff again, will you?
Yeah.
It wasn't the exact phrase.
And the exact same thing transitions into business. If we keep trying to, create the conditions where, businesses never feel the consequences of the ramifications of bad decisions, then they will always continue to make bad decisions and look for someone to come in and bail them out or
bingo
to do whatever is necessary. So leaders have to learn by, sometimes taking risks, but a good leader understands how do you mitigate a risk. And so therefore it comes right back to where we are in our country right now with this coronavirus, where you sit down with courage, with competence. You study, you understand, you look not just in the near term, but in the long term, what are going to be the ramifications for the country based upon decisions. And then you come out and you make a decision, not where all of a sudden you have created a greater crisis. Over 22 million Americans now are unemployed. Sadly, yes, 45,000 have lost their lives. But Rick, let's understand that, it wasn't too long ago, a couple of years, that 61,000 Americans lost their lives in the common influenza flu season. And we didn't shut down the government for that. So that's where leaders, it starts in the home. It starts with our experiences and be able to say, hey, I blew my knee out, but life goes on. And I have learned that maybe next time I don't go out and do that and take that type of action because this was the consequence for it. But if you try to avoid or try to set conditions where those actions are never experienced, then you don't learn from it.
I love how eloquent you are. My dad would said, "Don't do that stupid stuff, you dumbass."
Yeah.
But that's fathers. And so mindset, I think, is really important. And you talked about business owners now, and we're struggling. I'm an independent business owner. I have a small leadership development firm. So we're feeling it. I'm very blessed to be able to do my podcasts and interview some great people. And I still got some classes going on, but there are others that are shut their doors. Yeah. So what do you think about mindset here? I mean, I know it's absolutely necessary. And again, in the book, Attitude, Commitment, and Action, we talk about roll up your sleeves, attitude, commitment, and action is you got to have the right mindset. Yeah. So seeing that mindset is important. And I'm curious how do you keep your mindset, even in that fear factor? Because you've been in battle, you've led men, you've seen that scary thing in front of you. So how do you keep the right mindset? What do you do to make sure that your mindset stays positive and something that can help others as a leader?
Well, that's where, my faith in Lord and Savior Jesus Christ comes into play. Every morning when I wake up and I started with my, little run, I just, pray to him. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I start my day with a morning devotional after, taking a shower and everything like that. And one of my favorite verses, two of my favorite verses, Joshua 1:9, do not fear or be dismayed, for the Lord thy God shall never leave you nor forsake you. And then Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ Jesus who strengthens me. And so when you have that inner strength within you, then you're not concerned about all the things around you. It goes back to history. I mean, you think about, Thomas Stonewall Jackson. A lot of people maybe don't understand or realize where he got that nickname Stonewall. And that was at the first battle of Manassas, when the Confederates were being routed, and the Georgians start fleeing the battlefield. And then the commander of the Georgia regiment said, look there is Jackson standing like a stone wall. He was sitting right there atop of his horse, just like no care in the world. And that simple act of being able to look and see him there on top of his horse, that turned the day. And
what a great I mean, I love that. I've actually been to the battlefield in Manassas, having grown up in the area. My parents took me. Heck, my mother told me, I think she said, we changed your diaper in the Smithsonian. So, but you know what that reminds me of? And there's a very cool movie. One of my old mentors, one of his mentors, was an Army officer named Tony Nadal. I don't know if that makes but you do remember who Hal Moore is.
Of course, everyone.
Of course, everybody remembers Hal Moore.
Captain Nadal was one of his company commanders there at the Battle of the Eye Drain.
Correct. And Brian, who was one of my mentors, that was his mentor when he was working for W.L. Gore. And so that movie, and it reminded me, I tell you that to tell you this. When I watched that movie, when we were soldiers, I still see Sam Elliott standing there. Flying recommend, looking around, Sergeant Major looking around going, all right, what's going on now? No fear, just standing there like Stonewall Jackson. And that's a true leader.
Yeah, no, that's what it's about. And again, that's why I say that my military hero is Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. He was, like I said, a professor of rhetoric at Bowdoin College, Maine. But, He volunteered to go and fight for the Union. And because of his education, he was given a commission and became a lieutenant colonel and became a commander of a regiment. And think about it. You're placed in a position at the end of the Army of the Potomac on the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, and you're told you cannot retreat, you cannot surrender, because if you do, the entire Army of the Potomac, 90,000 men, will be encircled by Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. And you're a professor of rhetoric. You're not trained in military tactics or anything like that. And through that day, that hot July day, countless amounts of assaults, casualties mount, runs out of ammunition. What does he do? He doesn't freak out. He understood his orders, and he ordered a bayonet charge. First time in the history of the Union Army that there was
imagine
an order of a bayonet charge. And it so shocked the Confederates that he saved the day. And not just saving the day, he saved the Battle of Gettysburg. He probably saved the Union, the United States of America. So here was an ordinary guy, professor of rhetoric, who, even wounded in the leg, continued to lead in the most dire of circumstances and situations. And guess what? He went on to become a recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor and a two-time governor of the state of Maine.
That's amazing.
That's what America, that's what leadership.
Those are great stories. Those are great stories. And that's what we need to share, I think, with our youth today are these stories, and continue to share some of those stories of leadership. One of the things it just reminded me of was the story of Hernando Cortez.
Yes.
When he burned the boats.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fun story. And we don't have time today to really go into that story. But if anybody listening wants to look at, just Google "burn the boats," and there's a couple good stories, actually good storytellers to show that story. But literally, there was no going back.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that's what leaders do. Leaders show that there is the light at the end of the tunnel. And leaders inspire that belief in others. So at a time like this, we should have folks that are saying America is going to get through this, and we're going to reopen our businesses because we're not going to cower in fear to this. Yes, we have to protect those people that are the most vulnerable to this virus, but we're not going to continue down the path of seeing 22, 23, 24 million Americans unemployed and in food lines.
You're absolutely right. And that's it's going to take some solid leadership, and guys like yourself who are on the front lines right now working and have been for years. And I thank you for that, for your service and what you've done, sir. But I also want to talk about your books. Mm-hmm. Something that as a fellow author, I've got two, you've got two, but yours sound much more interesting than mine. Mine are just selling and doing stuff. Guardian of the Republic and Hold Texas. Those are your two books.
Well, actually, there was a third one that came out this past February.
Well, why don't you share about that?
The third book is called We Can Overcome, an American Black Conservative Manifesto, because it is about the history of conservatism in the Black community and how those first principles need to be, once again embodied within the inner city, the Black community, to restore, that community to what it can be. And so instead of "We shall overcome," which of course is the song that you remember, the Negro spiritual, sure, that's more of a passive verb. I think that we can overcome, and that's about leadership, showing, this is the way forward.
Yeah, I love that. And as I like to call you in my mind, what I hear is you're an unapologetic American.
Yeah,
and I love that. We all should be, but you are. And I'm sure you catch some grief for it all the time. And we kind of have the same belief systems. Mm-hmm. And let's be strong. Let's be Americans. Let's take care of that. We've got a lot going on in our country, and it's about taking care of America first. And I love that. I
agree. And taking care of each other. And so when I, again, coming back to this current crisis, I think the biggest thing that we can learn from this is that our health and our healthcare is our personal responsibility. If we, allow someone else if we delegate that responsibility to someone else, being government, then they're going to always make their own decisions, because they're not going to act in our best interest as individuals. They're going to act in their best interest as far as their ideological agenda. So I hope that is one of the great things. And when you talk about America being a republic, when you talk about Texas, and again, that mystique and that aura about Texas, It's about rugged individualism. It's about understanding that the most important thing in the United States of America is the individual, their rights, their freedoms, their liberties, their sovereignty. The individual is not subjugated to the institution of government. The institution of government is subjugated to the individual in these United States of America. And when you look at some of the decisions that some of these governors and some of these local elected officials are making, they're saying that they and government are a ruling class and not a class that seeks to govern.
So, and that's it. And I know you're also a big Second Amendment supporter,
Oh, yeah.
as I am as well. I mentioned you're on the board of directors for the NRA, and matter of fact, I got out to go do some shooting this past weekend.
Me too.
So I'm gonna. Oh, good. Maybe we can get together and do a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna brag a little bit. Can I brag a little bit?
Go for it.
I started shooting a new SIG 320.
Oh,
Right?
nice.
I like the gun. I like it.
Yeah.
And we had a little steel challenge with the group of guys that went out. So we started at 40 yards on an 18 by 18 steel. Bing, bing, get 2 shots to hit it once. We ended up at 70 yards.
Wow. That's
and
awesome.
Guess who won?
I guess you.
Boom.
Well, the SIG P320 is now the official sidearm for the United States Army.
I do know that. That's one of the reasons I bought it.
So, yeah, I have a P365 and a 226 Legion, which the 226 was, the sidearm for our special operators, Navy SEALs. I think now they've gone to a Glock 19.
Yeah, they have.
Glock 19. But I went out to an outdoor range this past weekend. I have a Remington Model 700 long range, and
Nice.
I was able to get out. I nailed a steel target at 500 yards, so I'm pretty happy.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
That's cool. And that's some of the things we love about each other. Motorcycle riders.
Yeah.
You're also a master scuba diver.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I've been diving since 1984, believe it or not. So I took my first dive down in Roatan, of all places. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned to dive in 84. I love it. So again, a lot of parallels, a lot of similarities between us. Again, walking down the street, they might, without your hair, they might not recognize who's who.
Well, they shouldn't. And America is not about these external, features and demographics. America is about what's in your heart. Texas is about what's in your heart. And that's what should bind us together.
That's what I love about you, Alan. That is one thing I love about you, Colonel. And that's it. So I want to be conscious of your time. I know you're busy. You got things going on. I do have some things that, as our conversation, extemporaneous as it was, there were some things that I know we're always listening. I ask all of my guests to answer. First one is, and this will show to the core to who you are. You're holding a dinner party, and for 6, you being one, you get to invite 5 people in all of history from today rearward, alive or dead. Who do you invite and why?
I would invite Alexander the Great, Leonidas, king of the Spartans, Hannibal, who led the Carthaginian army. I'd invite Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, and I would probably invite, I just forgot his name, but the commander of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which was the first Black regiment. I'd invite him just to thank him for having the courage to do what he did. And probably if I couldn't get him, I'd get Henry O. Flipper, who was the first Black graduate of West Point.
Oh, very cool. And again, I'm a West Point fan. I have a nephew who's class of 15, the golden from 15 to 15, 1915 to 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So second question's here. We all have an expiration date. So you've passed, you're gone, and they're writing an article about Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. What's the headline or what's the title?
I would ask that, the same epithet that is there that Leonidas gave to that Spartan to take back to Sparta, it would be on my final resting spot. And it would be, go tell the Americans and strangers passing by that here, obedient to their laws, I lie. Excellent.
And finally, you mentioned earlier, you get up, you shower, you do devotional. What do you do every morning to set yourself up for success?
I do PT, old school Army PT. I get out and, anywhere from 3 miles up to 5.5 miles. come back and do old school push-ups and crunches, stomach exercises, because that's a routine. And I think that it really does clear your mind to be able to get out there and not have the drill sergeant or the first sergeant yelling at you while you're running. Just be at peace and have time to commune with the Lord and just let Him fill you with what He would want you to do in this day.
Excellent, excellent. So last but not least is anything you're promoting for yourself, anything that's going on you want to promote, new things that are going out, shout outs to anyone that you like to promote while you're here.
Well, follow us at west4texas.com. That's our website for the chairmanship of the Republican Party of Texas. In the month of June, I, along with many other Black conservatives, will be in a documentary called Uncle Tom. That will be coming out, and we've already started dropping some of the teasers for that. And continue to follow us on theoldschoolpatriot.com.
Awesome. Theoldschoolpatriot.com. I love it. He's got some great, Alan, you've got some great blog articles up there, and a lot of really good insight. And I love reading what you say. Every once in a while, you not every once, but pretty regularly, you hit a nerve right there. So go out to oldschoolpatriot.com and check out the blog, check out what's going on in Colonel West's life. And I just thank you for being on. It's been an incredible honor and a privilege to have you on The Bald Truth here. And we look forward to getting out, popping some caps, maybe taking a ride. It looks like Sunday is going to be a nice day to take a ride on the motorcycle too.
Yeah, and May the 30th, we're doing a veterans ride through East Texas, a 140-mile ride. It will start, we'll meet up in Mount Vernon, head up to Mount Pleasant, and then we'll head back through East Texas through the Lake Country there. So
okay, is that going to be like that Iron Butt one we did up to Fort Sill?
Maybe not that long, but but we
it was like 450 miles.
Yeah, well, it was nice to go up to old Fortress Hill and see the home of the artillery.
Well, that was your home. It was nice to meet your I think it was your nephew, right?
Yeah, it was my nephew. Yeah, he's a
nice young man.
Yes, he is.
Nice young man. Very good. Well, I thank you for being on, Alan. Really appreciate you, and I look forward to the ride in May. So I'm in, but I'm going to, once again, I get to ride your 6. Check 6. You got me back there.
All right. 140 miles.
As always, I got your back.
Thanks, sir.
You've been listening to the Bald Truth Leadership Podcast with Coach Rick Colster of the Peak Performance Group, the company that helps people and organizations reach their potential. If you're looking for a way to grow your organization, either through strategic planning, direction, or leadership development, the Peak Performance Group is the place to look. You can call us at 817-748-7425 or find us on the web at www.mypotentialplus.com, and we will connect you with the right coach. I'm Coach Rick, and that's the Bald Truth.